Take a deep breath in. Let it go slowly, gently. Feel the softness of the pillow beneath you, the warmth of your blanket, gently hugging your body. The room quiets now. The outside world begins to fade into a blur of shadows and moonlight. You are safe here. There is no need to do anything. There is nowhere to be. Just this moment. Just this breath. Just this gentle slowing, sinking deeper and deeper into rest. Imagine the sound of soft wind threading through tall trees, branches swaying gently under the silver hush of twilight. A low fire crackles in a distant hearth, golden warmth flickering across wooden beams. You're home in this moment. Your eyelids grow heavier with each slow breath. And now, our story begins. It begins in a quiet village nestled between two hills, where the air always smells faintly of cedar and morning bread. The people here live by something ancient, something not written in any book or carved into any stone tablet. They live by the unwritten rules of life. The first rule whispered in the heart of this land is simple. Listen to understand. Not just hear, the wind carried no urgency, just a whisper, a nudge to slow down. You walked along the moss-lined path as the village eased into quiet twilight, and just ahead, a boy sat on a bench beside an old man. The boy's voice was shaky, weaving through fears and fragments of sentences. But the man did not rush. He leaned in, not to reply, but to receive. His eyes didn't dart away. His hands didn't twitch to fix. He breathed with the rhythm of the boy's words. There was a stillness in the way he listened, as if the act itself was enough. Not judgment, not advice, just space. The boy's voice softened. In that calm, he found his own answer, without interruption, without correction. That's how it is here. Listening is not the pause before speaking. It is the act of honoring someone's truth. Listen to understand, and understanding begins. You pass them quietly, the lesson imprinting itself like dew on your skin. Win-win. Always, in the center of the village square, two children faced off in a game of checkers. But the board was strange, twice the size of a normal one, the pieces painted with flowers and stars. An elder watched, smiling gently. When one child made a winning move, the other grinned, not defeated, but delighted. Instead of flipping the board or sulking, the child clapped for their friend. And then the winner leaned forward and said, "Let's play again. But this time, let's mix the rules so we can both build something." They turned the game into a story, a bridge-building exercise, a shared landscape of imagination. They weren't playing to defeat, but to create. This was no accident. It was how they were raised. No glory in standing alone atop a mountain no one else can climb. They believed deeply, with soft certainty, that we rise higher together. Every decision in this village is made with we in mind, not just me. Not compromise, but collaboration. Not surrender, but shared victory. Win-win always. Because kindness multiplies where ego divides. Praise effort. Just beyond the square, under an awning of hanging lanterns, a group of teens gathered around a long plank of wood. On it, a sculpture half finished, lopsided, but boldly beautiful. A girl stepped back, her shirt streaked with clay. Her fingers trembled as she glanced around. "Wow, it's not done," she said. "I messed up the angle." A boy approached. "You tried something new." His voice was quiet, but filled with warmth. "You kept going. That matters more than how it looks." And then a woman in an apron, perhaps a teacher, perhaps not, walked over and clapped her hands once. "Everyone, look at the bravery in this curve," she said, pointing to a strange twist in the sculpture. This mistake, it taught her something no perfect line ever could. Heads nodded. Smiles appeared. The praise wasn't for the product. It was for the persistence, for showing up, for trying again, for caring. Here, people see the effort. They name it. They celebrate it. Not because they're lowering standards, but because they know the road to mastery is paved with tender failures and proud attempts. And every step deserves to be seen. Own your part. Along the lakeshore where willows whispered to the water, two women sat on a blanket, their voices hushed by the surrounding calm. A low ripple of breeze carried the edge of their conversation to your ears. "I could have said it better," one whispered. She didn't offer excuses. She didn't cast blame like seeds to the wind. She owned her words, her part, in the ripple they caused. The other woman smiled, her shoulders softening. "You didn't mean harm," she said gently. "But I see you, and I thank you for saying it." There was no tug of war, no tallying who hurt whom more. Just the quiet strength of accountability. In this village, they don't wait for guilt to pile high. They step forward early, offering recognition like a bouquet. "I see where I faltered. I own what I brought to the storm." It's not weakness, it's integrity, woven into everyday life like a hidden thread in a quilt, unseen but holding everything together. And when you hear it, when you feel someone say this part was mine, it's like the wind shifts, walls dissolve, and healing begins. Mirror then, fix. Further down the bend, a carpenter and her apprentice stood beside a splintered beam. The apprentice was flustered, his voice clipped, his hands uncertain. "I measured it 3 times, he murmured. "I don't know what went wrong." The carpenter didn't correct him immediately. She didn't begin fixing the mistake. "First," she mirrored. "That's frustrating," she said softly, nodding. "You put care into this." He looked at her, eyes meeting like anger settling. Her voice was steady. "I've had days like that, where even the most careful steps still veer off course." Only then, after she saw him, did she lift her tools. Together they worked quietly. The air between them lightened. That's the rhythm here. Before they repair the broken board, they honor the broken spirit. Before they offer solutions, they hold space for emotion. Not every wound needs a bandage right away. Sometimes it just needs a mirror. A reflection that says, "I hear your frustration. I see your care. You're not alone." And then, the fixing can begin. It's fresh humor. In a garden shaded by grapevines and tall laughing sunflowers, a family was setting the table for a twilight meal. Children raced between the dishes, giggling. A woman tripped over a basket and, in the most theatrical of stumbles, fell softly onto a pile of cushions. A beat of silence. Then laughter, light, warm, and free. Her own laughter came first, leading the way. "That was my award-winning dive," she proclaimed, posing like a swimmer. Everyone joined in, not to mock but to delight, because in this place humor doesn't bruise. It cushions, it invites, it tickles the air without scratching the soul. They don't make fun of each other, they make fun with each other. They know the difference. Fresh humor is a spring, clean, gentle, bubbling up to lighten the world without sourness. No sarcasm laced with poison. No laughter that silences instead of liberates. Just joy, shared like fresh bread. Even when someone slips, even when the soup spills, they laugh with love and no one walks away stung. Laughter is sacred here because it heals without harm, because it's light without sharpness, because it says it's okay to be imperfect. We're all in this dance together. Be present. The forest grew quieter as twilight melted into dusk. You followed a winding trail of soft lanterns, each flame a tiny heartbeat in the gathering dark. There, in a clearing dotted with mossy stones, a young father knelt before his daughter. She was holding up a tiny pine cone, her face lit with wonder. "It looks like a dragon egg," she whispered. The father smiled and lowered himself fully to the ground. He didn't check his watch. He didn't scroll through his phone. He didn't nod absently or say, "uh-huh," as a placeholder. He was here, with her, for her, within her moment. His eyes followed hers. His imagination joined her world. The pine cone became a dragon egg. The wind became its breath. The rustling trees became ancient watchers. Be present, not just in body, but in soul. In this village, presence is a gift wrapped in silence and gaze. It's not the quantity of time, but the quality of attention. Even a single minute, given wholly, is worth a lifetime of half-glances. The girl squealed with laughter as she ran off to plant the egg in a bed of moss, and her father stayed still, watching her disappear into twilight, fully present, still and smiling. Hold the fault. A little further along, you found yourself near a bakery that glowed like a lantern in the night. The scent of cinnamon and warm dough curled into the air, comforting as a hug. Inside, a man stood behind the counter, his face furrowed with regret. Across from him, a customer held a bag of crushed pastries, crumbs spilling like quiet disappointment. "I packed them too fast," the man admitted. "I rushed. That's on me." There was no deflection. No blame tossed at the bag, or the weather, or the rhythm of a busy day. He held the fault like one would hold a fragile vase, gently, carefully, responsibly. And in doing so, he softened the sting of the mistake. The customer's face shifted. Her anger, once sharp and rising, dulled into understanding. Mistakes are inevitable here. But how they're held, that changes everything. To hold the fault means to accept the weight of your action without collapsing or passing it on. It's a strength, not a shame, a quiet dignity. "I'll make you a new one," he said softly, already moving with care. And as she left moments later, warm bag in hand, heart a little lighter, you realized the fault had been held, and in doing so, had vanished. Kindness is action. On the way back through the village square, a lantern flickered low. A young boy, perhaps no older than 7, noticed its soft dimming. He paused, fished in his little pocket, and pulled out a small matchbox. Hands a bit clumsy but eager, he struck a match and relit the flame, shielding it from the breeze with his body. No one had asked him. No reward awaited him. But he did it anyway. Because here, kindness is not just a feeling. It's movement. It's stepping into a moment and making it better. Not someday, not ideally, but now. Later that evening, an older woman struggled to lift a bucket of water near the well. 3 people saw her. None of them asked, "Do you need help?" They simply rose and helped. There were no grand gestures, no loud declarations of goodness, just a rhythm of care embedded into the fabric of life. Kindness is action. It's holding open a gate. It's sharing your umbrella. It's remembering the milk someone forgot. It's noticing and then doing. In this place, kindness is a verb. And in each small, quiet gesture, a brighter world is built, brick by invisible brick. Rest is strategy. The stars had begun to blanket the sky in soft constellations, and the fields were quiet now. Golden wheat hushed under the lull of evening wind. Near the edge of a wide meadow, an elderly man lay in a hammock stretched between 2 cedar trees. A book rested open on his chest. His breath rose and fell with the kind of ease that comes only from letting go. A boy passed by, pausing to peer at him curiously. "You're always resting," he said, not unkindly, just puzzled. The old man opened one eye, then he smiled. "I'm strategizing," he said. The boy tilted his head. "Rest is how I think clearer. Rest is how I keep from fraying. It's not laziness, it's wisdom." He closed his eye again, letting the hammock sway. In this village, rest is not earned only through exhaustion. It is built into the flow of every day, like pauses in music, there to shape the rhythm, not to disrupt it. Gardeners nap between rows. Builders sit quietly before lifting wood. Even the animals seem to understand. Pause, breathe, renew. Because they know, you don't run forever on an empty tank. You don't grow in constant motion. Here, rest is strategy, and every sigh is sacred. Spot potential. On a stone bench nestled beneath a blooming arch of jasmine, A teacher sat with a teenage girl. The girl's notebook was full of crossed out lines, pages torn, ideas started and abandoned. "I'm just not good at this," she muttered, eyes downcast. The teacher flipped gently to a page nearly blacked out in ink. "You're trying to hide this part," she said softly, "but I see the shape underneath. It's new. It's bold." The girl blinked. "I messed it up. You started something most wouldn't even dare to sketch." There was no lecture, no forced encouragement, just recognition. In this village, they look past the rough edges. They see the seed inside the husk. A shy singer humming in corners. They hear a future ballad. A nervous speaker stammering through her first lines. They see the roots of a poet. Potential here is not measured by polish. It's honored by the willingness to try. To spot potential is a skill cultivated like a garden. It means saying, "I see something in you, and I'll water it with belief." And so the girl looked up. Her shoulders shifted. And for the first time in days, she turned to a fresh page and began again. "I'll offer last slice." The baker's table was long and fragrant, crowded with honeyed rolls and nut-crusted loaves. Families gathered in loose circles, plates in hand, laughter rising like steam into the starry night. At the end of the table sat a single remaining slice of lemon tart. Children noticed it first. They stared, wide-eyed, calculating. Then one boy stepped forward and gently nudged the plate toward his friend. "You like this more than I do," he said with a shy smile. The other boy beamed. But instead of taking it right away, he broke the tart in half and returned one side. Both smiled wider. In this village, the last slice isn't a prize, it's a moment. A chance to say, "You matter to me more than this fleeting thing." It's not about lack or sacrifice. It's about joy multiplied in generosity. And so the tart was shared and savored. Two boys on a bench, legs swinging in rhythm, cheeks sticky with lemon and laughter. To offer the last slice is not to give something away. It's to give a piece of joy. And in that giving, joy returns tenfold. Laugh first. The town square was alive with quiet festivity, paper lanterns glowing like fireflies, the cobblestone warm from the day's sun. A circle of friends sat around a low table, sipping tea and nibbling on crumbly biscuits that scattered like stardust on their laps. One man, lanky and full of earnest energy, tried to tell a joke. It didn't land. In fact, it twisted and turned and unraveled mid-sentence until even he couldn't find the punchline. He blinked. Everyone stared. Then he laughed, bright and bashful and free. And one by one, the others joined in. Not at him, but with him. Because here, laughter isn't currency. It's a connection. And the rule whispered between smiles is simple. Laugh first. Not out of obligation, but out of warmth, out of kindness. To create a moment of lightness rather than judgment. To give the storyteller dignity rather than silence. In this village, they don't let awkwardness grow teeth. They soften it with mirth. Laughter is not a performance. It's a balm. And sometimes the best punchline is just the joy of trying. As the man leaned back, cheeks flushed and spirit restored, he said, "I'll work on it." Someone replied, "Don't you dare." Timing over truth. Later that evening, under a willow tree whose branches brushed the ground like whispers, two women spoke in hushes. One held a truth she'd carried for days, a misunderstanding, a frustration, a wound gently scabbed. She wanted to say it. She had every right to say it. But the other woman, she was tired. Her shoulders slumped from a long day. Her hands trembled from a recent loss she hadn't spoken of yet. And so the first woman waited. Not forever, just not now. She chose timing. Not because truth didn't matter, but because delivery did. Here they honor truth by serving it gently. When minds are open, not overwhelmed. When hearts are soft, not raw. Because they know, even truth, when dropped too hard, can shatter. Timing is not manipulation. It is compassion. It is the art of care. Later, when the moment was right, she shared her truth, and it landed like a feather, not a stone. And it was heard, because the ground had been softened first. Give presence. Just beyond the chapel, where vines climbed the stone like poetry, a man sat beside his aging father. The older man didn't speak much anymore, his thoughts slow, tangled. The son could have filled the silence with stories, or questions, or updates from the world outside, but he didn't. He held his father's hand, rubbed his thumb in small circles, watched the way the sun filtered through the old man's eyelashes, turning them silver. And he stayed. No distraction, no impatience. He offered nothing but himself, his attention, his warmth, his being. Give presence, not as a luxury, but as a gift, a sacred one. Here they understand that presence is more precious than pearls. You don't have to solve. You don't have to perform. You only have to show up fully. And sometimes that is more healing than any perfect words ever could be. The old man smiled, small, faint. The kind of smile that rises only when someone truly stays. Praise spontaneously. The morning came quietly in the village, as it often did. A soft drizzle dusted the rooftops, and puddles mirrored the dawn. Near the painter's hut, a young boy knelt beside a wooden box. His small hands were smeared with streaks of every color, green and orange on his cheek, blue along his fingers. He had painted a bird. Its wings were uneven, its eye a little too large, but it flew across the wooden panel like it meant something. A passerby slowed. She wasn't a teacher, she wasn't a critic, just someone on her way to the bakery. But she stopped and smiled. "This wing," she said softly, pointing. "It looks like it's catching the wind. That's magic, you know." The boy's mouth opened slightly. His hand paused in mid-motion. No ceremony, no staged applause. Just praise given freely. In this village, you don't wait for the stage or the grade or the finished piece. You praise in the moment. Because it's not about perfect execution. It's about recognizing effort, feeling, boldness when it blooms. And when it does, you say so. You say, "I see it. I see you." And what you did here, it moved me. The boy painted another feather, this one more daring than the last. Check in twice. Near the ivy-draped schoolhouse, an old woman walked slowly, her cane tapping a rhythm across the cobblestones. A young neighbor passed by and paused with a soft smile. "Morning," he said. "You doing okay today?" She smiled politely, nodded. Yes, I'm fine." But he didn't keep walking. He shifted gently, waited, looked into her eyes, not just her answer. "Are you sure?" he asked. "Really sure?" And just like that, her posture changed. Her eyes welled just slightly. "Well," she said, voice tremoring, "it's been a hard morning." He didn't press. He just offered his arm. Because in this village, they know the first answer is often armor. People wear politeness like a shield, not because they want to deceive, but because it's habit. It's easier than unraveling. So they check in twice, once for the mask, once for the truth. And when you do that, gently with care and curiosity, people soften, walls fall, and connection finds its way in. The two walked slowly toward the tea shop. No rush, just presence. One holding space, the other gently held. Assume error. In the quiet corner of the tailor's shop, where pins glinted in soft light and spools of thread waited patiently on their shelves, two apprentices stood in silence. One had moved a roll of fabric. The other had been looking for it for nearly an hour. Frustration trembled just beneath the surface. But instead of accusation, the boy sighed and said, "I must have missed it. Probably walked right by." The other's shoulders eased. No, I think I moved it. Didn't even realize." And just like that, no sparks, no fight, just awareness. In this village, they assume error, not malice. They don't leap to blame. They lean into possibility. Maybe it was a mistake. Maybe it wasn't personal. Maybe it's just a small human moment. And most of the time it is. By assuming error, they prevent hurt from spiraling. They make room for understanding before resentment has a chance to root. Mistakes happen. That's part of life. But suspicion? That's a choice. And here they choose softness first. Let one in. The lanterns were being lit one by one along the garden path. They flickered with the soft promise of warmth, of welcome. Inside the community hall, a quiet celebration was blooming. Teacups clinking, voices humming, chairs pulled into circles. Outside, by the edge of the window, stood a boy. He didn't know where to stand. He shuffled from foot to foot, his jacket a little too thin, his eyes unsure. No one had told him he wasn't welcome. But no one had told him he was either. Then a girl spotted him. She paused in the middle of setting out cookies, walked over, and opened the door just wide enough to matter. "Hey," she said softly, "come in. We were hoping you would." He blinked, just once, then stepped through. Let one in. That's all it takes to change a life. A single gesture. A hand reached out. A space made in the circle. A glance that says, "You belong here." Here, they don't wait for people to ask. They open the door first. And in doing so, they let light into the places that were dim and waiting. Because one invitation can undo 100 quiet rejections. Voice notes. Work. Along the hillside road where messages were once carved into bark and passed on folded paper, a woman sat cross-legged in her garden, her phone resting gently in her palm. The sun was setting. The bees were softening into rest. She held the phone up and pressed record. Her voice was not rehearsed. It wavered at the edges. It cracked in the middle. But it was real. "I don't have the words to text this," she said quietly, "but I've been thinking of you, and I wanted you to hear it." She paused, then added, "You matter. I'm proud of you. That's all." She hit send. No perfection, no filters, just her voice, moving through the invisible thread of connection between them. And on the other end, her friend played the message. Again and again. Because sometimes voice notes work. Sometimes hearing someone's tone matters more than eloquence. Here they believe in the power of tone, of presence and sound. Even the pause between words can soothe. Even the breath at the end can comfort. They don't need a script, just sincerity. And in the rhythm of speech, the listener hears, "You are not alone." Restrained, declined kindly. At the base of a quiet hill, beside a table cluttered with invitations, a man sat with 2 letters in his hands. One he'd written eagerly, saying, "Yes, absolutely, I'll be there." The other, he held a little longer. It was addressed to an old friend, and it read, "I can't come this time." He sighed, then continued writing. "But I'm so grateful you thought of me, and I hope it's beautiful, and I hope to join next time when I can be more present." In this village, people don't say yes from guilt. They don't show up half-hearted, but they also don't disappear in silence. They decline kindly, because behind every invite is a hand extended, a hope offered. And even if the answer is no, the hand still deserves a warm touch. Here, saying no is not a rejection of the person. It's a reverence for the truth. You can honor someone, even as you step back. You can close the door gently. And that gentleness, it echoes louder than silence ever could. Step aside. The footbridge near the East Orchard was narrow, arched just enough to let the stream whisper beneath it. In the soft haze of early afternoon, 2 villagers met at its center, one with a cart full of lavender bundles, the other with a tray of clay pots balanced in both arms. They paused. Both looked at the other, then at the bridge. The man with the tray was younger, less steady. The woman with the cart noticed the slight tremble in his step. Without a word, she gently stepped back. "Let me," she said, smiling. She guided her cart off to the edge, careful not to let it tip. The younger man nodded gratefully, passing by with a quiet, "Thank you," and a breath he'd been holding too tightly. And once he was clear, she returned to her path, unrushed, unbothered. Step aside, not because you must, not because you were told, but because sometimes giving space is strength. In this village, stepping aside isn't about giving up. It's about seeing. Seeing when someone else might need a little more room, a little more grace, and giving it freely. Because there's no shame in yielding when yielding helps someone steady themselves. And often what you make space for grows beautifully. Label later. The sky had turned a milky gray by the time you reached the old orchard barn. Inside, a young woman sat beside a canvas, brush in hand, strokes jagged and uncertain. She had painted something that felt like a storm. Violets, grays, shadows curling into each other. A visitor stood behind her, arms folded. "What's it supposed to be?" he asked. She hesitated, then smiled, not quite looking up. "I'm not sure yet. Here, in this village, they don't rush to name things. They let feelings exist without categories. They let art breathe before interpretation. They label later. Because sometimes a moment is too alive to be boxed in. Sometimes a feeling is still unfolding, not ready for its final shape. They know that words can solidify too soon, turning something fluid into something fixed. So they wait. They allow wonder. They honor ambiguity. And they trust that meaning will arrive when it's ready." The visitor nodded, stepping back respectfully. And the woman dipped her brush again, adding another layer to her not yet named storm. Because sometimes the most powerful truths are born before we can explain them. Share the clouds. The hill above the village was known as Skywatcher's Hollow. Children and elders alike gathered there on blankets and cushions, lying back to look upward together. On this particular afternoon, the sky was a theater of shapes. A turtle drifted into a ship, then melted into a crown. A little boy pointed, excited. "I see a dragon." His friends squinted. "It's a horse." They giggled, voices overlapping. An older woman nearby leaned in gently. "Maybe it's both," she said. "A dragon becoming a horse." The children's eyes lit up. And just like that, the cloud was not a contest. It was a conversation. Here, when they gaze upward, they don't argue over what they see. They share the clouds. Each vision is valid. Each perspective is honored. And the sky becomes richer for it. It's not about being right. It's about being witnessed. In this village, imagination isn't corrected. It's celebrated. And the more stories a cloud holds, the more magic it brings. So they keep looking up together. Not to solve the sky, but to wonder within it. Praise in public. Evening had painted the village in gold, with the marketplace winding down. Baskets lighter and voices quieter. In the center square, beneath a trellis of flowering vines, a group gathered for the weekly story circle. Elders in soft shawls, children on their bellies, artisans brushing flour from their aprons, all surrounded a quiet woman who had just shared a new song. It was simple. Just her and a reed flute, breathy and tentative. When she finished, there was silence. And then the village baker stood. "I saw how hard you worked on this," he said, voice strong but warm. "I heard the change in the second verse. It made me feel something." Others nodded. One by one, they spoke, naming the parts that moved them, celebrating not just the effort, but the beauty. Her eyes shimmered, not from pride, but from being seen. Here they praise in public, not for show, not to flatter, but because they understand that acknowledgement, spoken aloud and witnessed by others, can build someone from the inside out. They don't withhold kindness. They don't wait for perfection. They speak their gratitude in front of others, because praise that echoes strengthens the roots of those it touches. And the woman, she played the song again, this time loud. "Don't tease." In the soft corner of the schoolyard, under a fig tree whose fruit hung heavy with sweetness, a boy stumbled during a relay game. His arms flailed, his knees met dirt, and silence rushed in fast. Someone nearby chuckled. Just once, then stopped. Because here they don't tease. Not even in jest, not even in play. Instead, a girl walked over and extended her hand. "You almost made it," she said, smiling. "Let's try again together." The boy blinked, surprised. His cheeks, once flushed with shame, calmed. They dusted off and ran the race again, this time side by side. In this village, teasing is not disguised affection. They understand that even the gentlest joke, when built on someone else's slip, can leave a bruise that lasts long after the laughter fades. They don't trade someone's dignity for amusement. They protect it. Because to them, kindness isn't just how you treat someone when they succeed, it's how you carry them when they stumble. And laughter? It's shared, never pointed, respect boundaries. The Potter's studio sat nestled in a grove of eucalyptus trees, its door always cracked open just enough to welcome, never enough to intrude. Inside, a young woman worked quietly, hands deep in clay, shaping a vessel with careful intent. A friend arrived, humming, peeking through the doorway. The Potter smiled, but didn't speak. Her hands never paused. The friend understood. She waited outside, swinging gently on the porch swing, sipping the tea she'd brought with her. Because here they respect boundaries. They don't need explanations. A closed door isn't a rejection. It's a request for space. A silence isn't cold. It's sacred. And when someone says not today, they don't press. They don't pry. They trust that every person is the keeper of their own energy. Later, when the pot was set to dry and the air smelled like earth and focus, the Potter stepped out. She sat beside her friend and said, "Thank you." No apology, no guilt, just appreciation. Because boundaries kept her bridges built, made of trust, not tension. And here, space is not a distance. It's a gift. Short apology. The rain had started just moments ago, tapping lightly on every surface. Roof tiles, windows, leaves. It wasn't storming. It was whispering. Inside the general store, two people stood near the shelf of glass jars. One had bumped the other without noticing. Just a shoulder brush, nothing major. But the second person had dropped a jar. Nothing broke, but their breath caught. Their hand trembled. "I'm sorry," the first person said. Simple, soft. 2 words, nothing more. "No, but you were standing in the way." No, it wasn't that big of a deal. Just, "I'm sorry." The words settled into the air like steam rising from a cup of tea. And in this village, that's enough. Here, apologies are not performances. They don't arrive dressed in explanations or weighed down by self-justification. They are brief, heartfelt, and powerful. Short apology. Because the weight of harm isn't lifted by debate, but by humility. The second person nodded, exhaling. A shared moment. No grudges, no lingering. Just two people returning to presence. The space between them clear again. Like the sky after a cleansing rain. Positive, some game. Later by the river bend where geese sometimes waddled and daisies nodded their sleepy heads. A group of young villagers gathered for a harvest exchange. They each brought something small. Eggs, berries, handmade soaps, stitched bookmarks. There wasn't a formal tally. No one kept score. Instead, they placed their items in a central circle and took only what they needed. If someone took less, another offered more. If someone brought nothing, they were still encouraged to join. The joy was in the togetherness, not the transaction. This wasn't about giving to lose or taking to win. It was a positive sum game. In this village, they believe in abundance, not because they have more than others, but because they share more than most. They understand that generosity doesn't subtract, it adds. That success isn't diminished by others' growth. And that joy, when shared, doesn't divide, it multiplies. They live by the quiet math of the heart. What I give, I gain. What I offer, I grow. And when you rise, I rise with you. The trade ended in laughter and song, Not because everyone got the most, but because everyone got enough. Let them arrive. At the edge of the village square, where sunflowers bowed gently toward the setting sun, a bench faced the open road. An elder sat there daily, knitting, humming, waiting. She never rushed anyone. Today a traveler approached from the distance, young, dusty, slower than usual. The elder did not rise or wave or call out. She just sat there, present, visible, open. And the traveler came step by quiet step. When they finally arrived and sat beside her, neither spoke for a while. And then the traveler said, "I almost turned back." And the elder smiled. "But you didn't. Because here they let people arrive. They don't demand timelines. They don't pull or push. They wait with patience. Because they know every soul arrives in its own time. Healing, understanding, courage, even conversation. They bloom at different paces. So they make space. They build benches, not deadlines. They offer open hearts, not urgent hands. And when someone finally steps through the metaphorical gate, they are met, not with "what took you so long," but with "I'm glad you're here. Goodbye matters." The market had emptied, and the air now carried only the scent of baked spices and earth. A young woman stood near the bakery, a woven satchel on her arm. Her eyes darted across the square, hesitant. Her friends spotted her from the steps of the post house. They met halfway. "I'm leaving in the morning," the woman said softly, her fingers nervously gripping the strap. Her friend didn't brush it off, didn't say, "We'll talk soon," or "Let's not make this a thing." Instead, she reached out, took both of the woman's hands, and looked her in the eyes. "Then let's say a proper goodbye." They walked together, quietly, to the tree where they first met, to the stream where they once cried, to the hill where they watched the stars. No rush, no avoidance. Because here, goodbye matters. They don't treat endings like afterthoughts. They honor them. They hold them tenderly. A goodbye is not a wall, it's a doorway, and how it's closed can shape what remains behind. Before dawn, they embraced. Not hurried, not half there, but fully, as if to say, "This mattered, you mattered, and so does this parting." Be future-friendly. By the old workshop near the village edge, a group of teens sat cross-legged around their mentor. The walls were papered with sketches, some faded, some fresh. The table held tools and dreams in equal measure. One girl asked, "What if the people who come after us don't care what we've made?" The mentor smiled and replied, "Then we still leave it better than we found it." She rolled up a map, a layout of the forest path they'd been repairing. Not because it was used often now, but because one day it might be. In this village, they plan for tomorrows they may never see. They write letters they may never read. They build benches that strangers might rest on. They're not driven by legacy, but by kindness unclaimed. To be future-friendly means to see beyond today's convenience, to think past your own presence. It means reducing harm, even when no one is watching. It means using gentler words because someone younger is always listening. It means building a world you may not inhabit, but someone else will. And when you act with future eyes, the future softens its gaze upon you. Celebrate small wins. The community garden hummed with quiet pride. There, under a crooked arch of climbing beans, a boy knelt by a plant no taller than his forearm. Around him were adults harvesting great piles of zucchini and corn. But the boy's joy wasn't dimmed, because in front of him grew his first strawberry. Just one, not fully red, but still, it was his. He cupped it like treasure, beaming as he carried it to his mother. She didn't say, "Just one," or "That's it." She knelt beside him, eyes wide as though he had brought her a ruby from a mountain. "You did this," she whispered, and he smiled wider than the sun. Here they celebrate small wins. Because growth isn't always loud. It isn't always obvious. Sometimes it's a whisper of red on green, a step taken without stumbling, a sentence said without stutter. They don't wait for the trophy. They cheer for the first try. They know that confidence blooms from being noticed. And when one tiny strawberry is met with love, a whole garden begins to grow. Let them finish. In the amber glow of the candle-lit inn, two old friends shared a table. One stirred her tea slowly, her words trickling like a stream over smooth stones. She was telling a story, one she had never spoken aloud before. Her voice cracked in places, paused, circled back, went quiet for moments at a time. And the other? She did not interrupt. Not once. She didn't guess the ending, didn't rush the middle, didn't say, I know where this is going. She just listened, eyes soft, hands still, heart wide open. In this village, they let people finish, because every story deserves the dignity of completion, because some thoughts take time to unfold, like blossoms that open only in moonlight. They know that to truly witness someone means holding space for their entire expression, even the silences between their words. When the woman reached the end of her story, her breath trembled, and her friend whispered, Thank you for telling me. No fixes, no advice, just reverence. Because finishing isn't just about words, it's about being allowed to exist fully. Text when late. The bell above the forge chimed softly as a young man stepped out, wiping soot from his hands. He glanced at the sun, lower than expected, and his eyes widened. He was late. Not terribly. Just enough that someone was probably wondering, where is he? So he pulled a small scroll from his satchel and scribbled 2 lines. Running behind, but I'm still coming. Didn't forget. Can't wait to see you. He handed it to a village messenger, who took off at a trot toward the square. Here, in this place of warm patience and quiet trust, they still text when late. Not because they're ruled by the clock, but because they value the emotional space of others. They know how it feels to wait, wondering. They know the weight of silence. So they lift it, with a sentence, a gesture, a sign that says, You are not forgotten. It's not about being perfect with time. It's about being considerate with presence. And when the young man arrived, cheeks flushed, eyes apologetic, his friend simply smiled and said, Thanks for letting me know. One yes too many. The rain had come again, soft and rhythmic, like fingertips on canvas. Inside the weaver's cottage, baskets overflowed with commissions, shawls in progress, threads in tangles, promises made under too much light. A woman stood near the window, her hand clutching a list, her shoulders curled inward. She had said yes to everyone. Yes, I'll do that for you. Yes, I can help. Yes, I'll manage somehow. But now the yeses felt still tired, still kind, picked up her pen and began rewriting her week. This time with breathing room. Laugh without harm. The fire pit crackled softly in the courtyard behind the library. Small sparks drifted up like glowing moss. Around the circle, villagers shared stories, tales from their youth, awkward moments, gentle jokes carried on the wind. A man began to tell a funny memory about his own clumsy attempt at dancing at last year's festival. He moved his arms in exaggerated waves, and laughter filled the night. Everyone chuckled, warm and light. He laughed too, first and loudest. And then another person added a memory of their own, about a mishap with flour and a missing spoon. Again, more laughter, tumbling and kind. Here they laugh without harm. No one's pain becomes the punchline. No one is laughed at. Instead, they laugh together, at shared humanness, at the things that unite them, falling, fumbling, trying, and continuing. The stories don't sting, they uplift. Because in this village, they know laughter can be healing, but only when it leaves no scars. And so they pass around joy like a warm cup, measured, mindful, and full of sweetness. Share the seat. The tram stopped gently at the bend where cherry trees framed the road like lace. Inside, the seats were mostly taken. An older woman stepped in, her steps slow but proud. At once a young man stood, offering his place. But before the woman could take it, he noticed a child beside her, small, tugging gently at her skirt. He reached again and patted the bench. "Sit together," he said, sliding further along the cushion. "There's space for both of you." The child beamed. The woman nodded, eyes soft. "Share the seat. It's more than politeness here. It's a way of seeing. Who else needs space? Who else can be welcomed into comfort?" Sometimes it means moving over. Sometimes it means adjusting expectations. Sometimes it simply means not taking more than you need. In the village, benches are built a little wider. Tables are set with extra plates. Plans are made with room for one more. Because here, enough is a community word. And when the tram started moving again, laughter from the child filled the car like wind through wind chimes. The seat was shared, and so was joy. Absence teaches. In the back garden behind the chapel, a weathered chair sat beneath an arching pear tree. No one had used the chair in weeks. It belonged to a villager who had passed away quietly, gently. Now, each morning, someone placed a flower there. Sometimes a pear from the tree, sometimes a poem on a folded slip of paper. There was no plaque, no speech, just space, a space where someone once was, and still somehow was. In this village, they don't rush to fill empty chairs. They don't cover over the silence. They sit with it. They learn from it. Because here they know that absence teaches. It teaches who cooked the morning bread, who told the jokes at market, who made sure the candles were always lit in the chapel window. And in that quiet ache, there is something sacred. Not just loss, but legacy. The space they leave behind becomes a teacher, a reminder of presence, of impact, of the way a soul can stretch far beyond its body and stay, in petals, in laughter, in echoes. So they honor absence. They do not fear it, because absence, too, can be full of love. Perfect pun. The rain had passed, and the village glistened like glass. Cobblestones shimmered with puddle reflections, and the scent of damp earth hung sweet in the air. Inside the apothecary, shelves of jars lined the walls, each with a handwritten label: lavender buds, rosemary twigs, powdered cloves. A small group stood near the counter: the apothecary, a gardener, and a boy delivering herbs. The boy opened his basket and smiled shyly. "A time traveler," he said, lifting the bundle. The room paused, then laughter. Not raucous or mocking, gentle, delighted, invited. "You're getting good at those," said the gardener with a wink. The apothecary scribbled a new label: "Pun of the day," and posted it beside the door. In this village, wordplay is not silly, it's sacred. Perfect pun. It's a celebration of attention, of finding connection in unexpected corners of language. No one groans in contempt here. They smile in appreciation. Because wit, when used kindly, becomes a bridge, a spark, a gift passed hand to hand. The boy left the shop with lighter steps, and behind him, the words lingered in the air like perfume. Time traveler. The joy layered in meaning. A laugh that healed. Don't wanna pain them. The hearth crackled inside the weaving hall, where people had gathered not for work, but for warmth. A woman spoke, her voice soft, carrying the weight of recent sorrow. She talked of a loss, personal, private. She didn't cry, but her words quivered. And when she finished, the room stayed quiet. Then someone else began. He shared a story too, not to outdo her pain, but to stand beside it. "I remember that ache," he said gently. "When I lost someone, I felt hollow for weeks." He wasn't comparing. He wasn't saying mine was worse. He was saying, "I've been there. I know how dark it gets, and I'm still here." In this village, they don't one-up pain. They don't turn grief into a contest. They don't meet vulnerability with hierarchy. Here, sadness is sacred ground. When someone opens it to you, you kneel beside them. You don't build a taller mountain of suffering, you walk with them through theirs. And in that, something extraordinary happens. Grief shrinks, just enough to breathe again. Because when pain is not outmatched, it feels held and understood. Be the noticer. At the edge of the stone plaza, near the rain barrel that always overflowed in spring, a girl sat by herself. She wasn't sad exactly, just quiet. Around her, life buzzed. Carts rolled by, conversations rose and fell. Someone played a flute near the bakery steps. But no one had stopped. No one, until an old man with a cane came by and paused. He didn't ask if she was okay. He simply looked at her shoes, scuffed but clean, and said, "New laces?" She looked up startled, then smiled just a little. "They're from my sister," she whispered. "Lovely color," he replied. He didn't stay long, just long enough to notice her. And in this village, that is everything. To be the noticer is not to intrude or inspect. It is to see, to catch the details others miss, the nervous fidgeting, the quietly changed hairstyle, the slightly slower step. It's not about fixing, it's about acknowledging. Here, noticing is an act of care. It says, you are not invisible. You matter. Even the small things you carry, I see them. And often, that's all someone needs, to be gently known, comfort in flaws. The cobbler's shop was lit with a single lantern, casting long shadows across leather scraps and curved tools. A boy sat on a stool, holding up a sandal he had stitched himself. The thread wandered where it should have been straight. One strap was shorter than the other. His brows furrowed. "It's not perfect," he muttered, turning it over in his hands. The cobbler leaned in, his voice low and warm. "No," he said gently, "it isn't." The boy glanced up, surprised. The cobbler smiled. "But neither is my hand, or this floorboard, or the door that creaks every time someone walks in." He tapped the sole of the sandal. "But this, it's yours, your work, your learning, and it will walk just the same. In this village, they don't chase flawlessness. They find comfort in flaws. A chipped bowl still holds soup. A cracked voice still sings. A crooked line still leads home. They celebrate the humanity of imperfection because it reminds them that growth is real, that effort is sincere, and that the world doesn't need perfection to be beautiful. It only needs presence." The smiled. The cobbler nodded. And the sandal was worn proudly the next day. Widen the Lens. On the hillside where windmills turned lazily in the sun, two friends stood beside a fence post, watching their flock scatter further than expected. One sighed. "They're all over the place today," she muttered. "Nothing is working right." The other squinted into the distance, then pointed. "Look there." A small cluster of sheep had formed a heart shape without knowing. And there, by the tree, they're shaded, resting. The first friend's face softened. She had been focused on what was chaotic, what didn't fit. But now she saw patterns, purpose, peace. Here they learned to widen the lens, to zoom out, to step back from the frustration, the moment, the narrow focus, and ask, what else is true? Yes, the plans shifted, but also new things bloomed. Yes, the path curved, but it revealed another view. They don't deny the difficulty, but they look around it, beyond it, because sometimes the story changes when you read the whole page, not just the hardest line. The friend chuckled softly. "Maybe they're just being poetic." The other smiled. "Or maybe we just finally noticed." Meet Softness, gently. In the quiet reading room of the village library, a woman sat curled in a window seat, a blanket wrapped around her shoulders. She wasn't crying, but she could have been. You could see it in her stillness, in the way she blinked slower than usual, as if every thought weighed a little more than it should. A librarian passed by. He didn't ask questions. He didn't try to brighten her mood. Instead, he placed a small cup of chamomile tea on the windowsill beside her. No words, no pressure. Just kindness. And then he walked on. Here they know when to meet softness gently. When someone is raw or quiet or curling inward like a leaf in frost, you don't knock loudly on their spirit. You sit beside them. Offer warmth without demand. Presence without expectation. You become the blanket, not the fire. And in that space, people unfold on their own, safely, steadily, because gentleness isn't passive. It's a power that whispers, I see you, and I will not push you to bloom before you're ready. Decline with grace. The afternoon sun filtered through grapevines hanging lazily above the cafe terrace. A musician approached the table where her friend sat reading, a journal open beside a half-empty glass of plum juice. I was hoping you could play for the gathering tonight, the musician asked, her voice hopeful. The friend closed her journal slowly, fingers resting on the edge of the page. I'd love to, truly, she said, but I'm tired in a way that music won't fix. She didn't stumble over the words. She didn't apologize 3 times. She simply declined, with grace. And her friend? She smiled. Thank you for telling me honestly, she replied, giving her hand a squeeze. Here they don't punish someone for choosing rest. They don't twist no into guilt. They treat every boundary as a gift of clarity. To decline with grace means you respect not only your own needs, but the other person's trust. It means saying, I see the value of what you're asking. I'm honored you asked me. Well, and I'm choosing myself today with kindness, not rejection. And in doing so, both walk away lighter. Because grace, when given in truth, never bruises. Quiet appreciation. Along the eastern road lined with willow trees and low stone walls, a tailor passed a gardener, kneeling in a patch of freshly turned soil. The air carried the scent of earth, mint, and sunlight on skin. The tailor slowed, watching for a moment. The gardener didn't look up, just continued planting marigolds, one by one, soft fingers patting the soil gently into place. And when the tailor moved on, she whispered quietly, beautiful work. The words weren't meant to be heard, but they were spoken all the same. Here they understand the art of quiet appreciation. It's not about spectacle. It's not always about being seen. Sometimes it's the small murmurs of gratitude to the unseen cook, the silent janitor, the friend who listens without fanfare. They speak praise like breath, constant, gentle, unnoticed by most, but essential. A nod across a room. A note slipped under a door. A flower left where someone will find it. They practice appreciation not to be acknowledged, but to nourish the invisible threads that hold everything together. And somehow, those threads grow stronger for it. Hallway courtesy. The inn had narrow hallways, lined with candle sconces and faded tapestries that whispered of stories long past. Late one evening, 2 guests crossed paths in the hallway. One held a tray of tea, the other was carrying laundry. They moved at different paces, one fast, one slow. But they both paused, smiled, shifted slightly to make room for the other. No hurry, no huffing breath. Just the shared dance of hallway courtesy. A hand to hold the door. A step back for space. A nod to say, I see you. In this village, every encounter is an invitation to kindness, even fleeting ones. They don't believe moments must be long to be meaningful. Even the smallest gesture, offering the inner side of the sidewalk, yielding a space by the fire, catching a falling scarf, can whisper, you matter. I respect your path. Even here in passing, I choose gentleness. And when those courtesies stack up, day after day, they build a world you want to linger in. A world where presence feels like a soft breeze, not a shove. You mirror feelings. The rain had returned that evening, slow silver streaks tapping gently against windows and rooftops. Inside the candlelit pottery studio, a young woman sat hunched over a half-finished bowl, her hands still, but her breathing a shallow. A friend entered, noticed her posture, the glisten near her eyes. They didn't ask, "What's wrong?" They didn't rush to cheer her up. Instead, they sat across from her and mirrored her stillness, matched her breath. Their presence softened to match her weight. "I feel that," they said after a quiet minute. "Whatever it is, I feel it with you." No fixing, no minimizing, just mirroring. In this village, when someone is heavy, you don't immediately lift. You reflect. Because mirroring creates safety. It says, you don't have to perform joy for me. You don't have to translate your sadness into something digestible. I'm here. I see it. I feel it as it is. And in that echo, people feel less alone. Eventually, the woman spoke. Just a few words. Her friend nodded, held space. And together they finished the bowl, quietly, beautifully. Not in spite of her feelings, but through them. Character unseen. Near the stone bridge that arched over the village stream, an elder walked each morning, picking up bits of wind-blown paper and fallen fruit from the market stalls. No one asked him to. No one saw him most days. He didn't leave notes behind or tell others what he'd done. But when the path was clear, when the orchard was tidy, people smiled. They didn't know who to thank. They simply felt the care. Because in this village, character isn't about being seen. It's about what you do when no one is watching. It's holding the ladder steady for someone who may never look down. It's tucking the blanket back around a sleeping friend. It's cleaning the common room, not for praise, but because you live here too. Character is the quiet backbone of a kind world. Tom, it's built in habits, not headlines. And though this man never spoke of what he did, his walk each morning became a kind of prayer, a silent offering to the shared good. So the path stayed clear, and the village walked it with ease, never knowing the name of the man who made it so. Emoji for clarity. Inside the sun-drenched post office, a teenager stood at the parchment table, scratching out a short note to a friend, an invitation to help with lantern hanging for the harvest festival. She paused at the end, tapping the feather quill against her cheek. Then, with a smile, she added a tiny sketch in the corner. A small lantern with sparkles, a crooked, smiley face. It wasn't elaborate, but it shifted the tone. Later, when the note was received, her friend laughed. "That little doodle told me everything," she said. "It said, you're excited, not just asking." Here they understand that tone isn't always clear in words. So they use gestures, drawings, even voice to color the message. Emoji for clarity. Not just to be cute, but to be kind. To show warmth where words might feel sharp. To soften honesty. To light the corners of intention. In the village, they teach children early. Words are houses, emojis are windows. They let the light in. So they sketch, they doodle, they leave hearts on notes. Because in a world of written words, emotion needs help sometimes. And clarity, wrapped in kindness, always lands softly. Own the typo. It was a quiet morning in the village co-op where letters were written, packages wrapped, and chalkboard menus updated by gentle hands. On the board that day, someone had written, "Fresh strawberry scones, still warm." 3 R's in strawberry. A small mistake. Later, a few villagers chuckled softly when they noticed, pointing it out with fondness rather than judgment. Oh, the baker, who had scrawled it earlier while balancing a tray on one hip, saw the smudged letters and smiled. She didn't cover it up with embarrassment. Didn't pretend someone else had done it. Instead, she picked up the chalk, circled the extra R with a little heart beside it, and wrote beneath, "Some things are sweeter with a slip." Here they own the typo. They don't hide their small mistakes behind walls of defensiveness. No, they invite others to laugh gently with them, not at them. Because owning the typo isn't just about a letter. It's about humility, humor, and heart. It says, I'm real. I'm trying. I'm okay with imperfection. And in that softness, connection blooms. More people bought scones that day than usual. Not just because they were warm, but because they were human. Designed with ramps. In the center of the village stood the old music hall, a space filled with light and echoed song. used by everyone from lullaby singers to community debaters. A ramp ran along one side of the stage, gently sloped, carved into the same wood as the floor, as natural as a shadow. It hadn't always been there. Long ago, someone had asked, "Can I reach the stage too?" And the village answered, not with hesitation, not with a debate, but with wood and time and care. Here, they design with ramps. They don't wait for someone to be excluded before acting. They include from the start. They build access into the foundation, not as an afterthought, but as an expression of welcome. Steps are useful, but ramps invite more. And in this village, access isn't about pity. It's about equity. It's about dignity. It's about saying, we want you here, not just if you fit, but because you belong. Now, no one even notices the ramp because it's become part of the design, as it should be. Don't tidy grief. Under the sycamore near the West Fountain, a man sat in silence, a letter crumpled gently in his palm. His shoulders sagged in a way that didn't invite questions. But nearby, a woman noticed. She approached slowly, then sat down, close enough to be present, far enough to give space. She didn't offer platitudes. She didn't say, at least. She didn't try to frame the pain into something palatable. She just said, I'm here. And let the silence stretch between them, honest and unpolished. In this village, they don't tidy grief. They don't rush to clean up tears or repot pain into something neater. They know that sorrow needs space, that grief is not a mess to be mopped, but a season to be honored. So they sit beside it. They bring food, not advice, blankets, not instructions. And when words do come, they arrive slow and low, wrapped in patience. The man didn't speak for a long time, but eventually his breath deepened, and that was enough. Let them cancel. It was a warm afternoon in the garden behind the town hall, where tables had been set with care, tablecloths smooth, candles centered, tea leaves steeping in clay pots. Birds hopped between hedges. Chairs waited patiently. But one chair would stay empty. A young artist had planned to host a poetry reading that day, her first public offering in months. She had practiced, prepared. But an hour before the event, she sent a note. I'm not feeling well, not in body, but in spirit. I can't show up fully today. I hope that's okay. No one sighed. No one complained. They simply gathered what she had left behind, her printed poems and her carefully folded invitations, and placed them gently in a basket to return later. Let them cancel. That's the quiet agreement in this village. If someone withdraws, they're met with grace, because here they understand that not every commitment is a promise to endure. Sometimes it's a hope that shifts with tenderness. They don't take cancellation personally. They trust it's honest. And often what someone needs most is permission to rest without apology. So the event was postponed. And when the artist returned a week later, they welcomed her not with questions, but with open arms. Ask their preference. In the lantern-lit kitchen of the inn, two people prepared dinner together, one peeling, the other chopping, their movements slow and companionable. At the counter sat a quiet guest, weary from travel, reading by the fire's glow. One of the cooks approached, holding two steaming mugs. Would you like chamomile or mint? The guest looked up surprised. Chamomile, please. And something softened in her face. Not just from the warmth of the tea, but from being asked. From being given a choice. In this village, they ask preferences often. Would you rather sit here or there? Do you prefer silence or conversation? Can I hug you, or would you prefer I sit beside you quietly? Because they understand that small choices add up. They create safety. They create belonging. When you ask someone's preference, you say, I see your individuality. I honor your comfort. You matter enough to shape this moment. And when the cook handed the mug to the guest, it wasn't just tea. It was dignity wrapped in steam. Protect what's subtle. On the edge of the meadow, Beneath a tall oak that bent just slightly west, a boy sat painting the same flower for the fourth time. It was nothing grand, just a tiny violet with a crooked stem, half hidden in the grass. Others walked past it easily, barely noticing. But the boy, he studied its shape as if it held secrets. A girl wandered by and paused. "What are you painting?" she asked, tilting her head. "This," he said, pointing gently. She leaned closer. "Oh," her voice lowered. "It's small," he smiled. "That's why it matters." She nodded, sat beside him, and began to sketch her own version. In this village, they protect what's subtle. They know that loud things are rarely lost, but gentle ones often are. They create quiet time for soft voices. They hold space for stories that don't shout. They notice the child who waits to speak. They pause for the tremble in someone's yes. They believe that subtle doesn't mean unimportant. It means layered. It means rich. It means this might not demand attention, but it deserves it. And so they protect it. Not with fences, but with presence, with slowing down, with noticing. And in doing so, the world becomes deeper and more whole. Here before fixing, the woodshop smelled of cedar and varnish, the air thick with the comfort of craftsmanship. Inside, a young apprentice stood by a half-built stool, tools spread across the table like puzzle pieces. He frowned, rubbing the back of his neck. "I don't get it," he muttered. "The legs wobble no matter what I do." His mentor, a soft-spoken woman with streaks of silver in her braid, didn't rush forward with answers. She didn't say, "You measured wrong." She didn't pick up the tools and take over. Instead, she said, "Tell me everything, from the start." And he did. Every measurement, every misstep, every guess. She nodded slowly. Not judging, just listening. Here they hear before fixing. Because they understand that people don't just need problems solved. They need to feel heard. Solutions are often easy, but listening, that's sacred. It allows the other person to breathe, to reflect, to feel human, not broken. And once the boy had finished speaking, and first, say their name. At the edge of the herb garden, a woman tended a rows of basil, thyme, and sage. She was new to the village, still learning which paths led where, still carrying the quiet ache of being unknown. As she clipped rosemary sprigs, a neighbor passed by and waved. "Morning, Alina." She paused, her hand, her breath. It had been days since someone had said her name. Not Miss, not you, not Hey, but Alina, her name. And in that moment, she felt herself land. Here they make a habit of using names, not to claim ownership, but to recognize presence. Say their name. It's the simplest way to say, "I see you. You're more than a role or a face. You matter." In the village, they learn names quickly and hold them gently. They call each other by name, even in small exchanges. "Thank you, Tamir." "Lovely work, Jessa." "Safe travels, Eli." Because names are music to the heart, anchors to identity. And for those who feel adrift, being named is the first step home. Alina smiled softly. She tucked the rosemary into her basket and felt less alone. Zoom out. A heated conversation had begun near the central well. Two friends, usually easy and playful, were caught in a tangle of emotion. One frustrated, the other defensive, both voices rising like wind before a storm. Then an elder walked by, not interrupting, but gently placing a folded piece of cloth on the rim of the well. They paused. "What's that for?" one asked. "To clean the view," she said softly, eyes twinkling. They blinked, and then both laughed. The elder continued on, but the cloth stayed behind, a symbol, a signal. And in that small interruption, something shifted. They took a breath. They zoomed out. In this village, when tensions rise, they practice stepping back, not just physically, but emotionally. They pause and ask, what is this really about? What else could be true? Am I seeing the whole picture or just one corner? Zooming out doesn't erase feeling. It expands it. It makes room for more truth, not less. And once the friends had taken a moment, they spoke again. This time slower, lower, wider, kinder. And the cloth stayed folded on the well, a quiet reminder that perspective is always within reach. Intro by Strength. At the spring festival, a row of children stood shyly near the storytelling circle, waiting for their turn to speak. The tradition was simple. Every child was introduced by a friend or family member. As a small boy with tousled hair stepped forward, his older sister stood behind him and placed a hand on his shoulder. "This is Sammy," she said with a smile. "He notices the birds before anyone else does, and he's really good at helping Grandma find her glasses." The crowd chuckled softly. Sammy blushed, but his eyes sparkled. He stood straighter. In this village, introductions are more than names. They're invitations into someone's life. Intro by Strength. Because when you lead with what's strong, people soften. They listen differently. They see with kind your eyes. They don't begin with labels like shy, new, or struggling. They begin with insight, generosity, kind observation. They lead with what is brilliant in someone, even if it's still growing. Because when someone is seen for their spark, they begin to believe in it too. And Sammy, he told a story about the three-legged crow, and the crowd leaned in. Curate Memories. In the attic above the tailor shop, beams of golden light slanted through a high window, revealing trunks filled with old ribbons, dried flowers, and tiny slips of parchment. Two friends sat cross-legged on the wooden floor, sifting through the items like archaeologists of joy. "This one," said one, holding up a faded blue ribbon. "The dance night. Remember how the lanterns caught fire?" They both burst into soft laughter. "That one's a keeper," said the other, tying it gently to a twine string along the wall. Here they curate memories. They don't just let time pass, they gather it. Not to hoard, but to honor. Not to live in the past, but to carry forward its warmth. They collect the small things. A note that said, "Thinking of you." A shell from a silent beach walk. A napkin from a cafe where a hard conversation became healing. Because these tokens remind them, you lived that moment. You mattered in that memory. It shaped you gently, and it deserves to be remembered. They don't wait for milestones to keep mementos. They keep what made them feel. Because memory, when curated with love, becomes a soft armor for the heart. Stay for story. At the foot of the hill where the grass thickened into meadow, a man sat carving a walking stick, whittling slowly beneath the shade of a chestnut tree. A traveler passed by on the path and waved. The man smiled and nodded, then added, "I've carved 100 of these, but this one's for someone special." The traveler paused, one foot forward, one still. Curious, the man looked up. "Want to hear the story behind it?" There was a beat, a breath, and then the traveler sat down. Here, they know when to stay for story, even when you have somewhere to be, even when it's not in the plan. Because the stories people carry don't always come back around. Sometimes they appear like fireflies, brief, beautiful, fleeting. And when someone offers one, you stay, not out of politeness, but out of reverence. You lean in, you hold the space. You say, "Yes, I want to know what shaped you. I want to hear what made this important to you." And so the man told of a child who once walked with him there, of laughter, of loss, of love embedded in every carved curve. And the traveler listened, fully, and left that hilltop carrying more than direction. He carried someone's story. Spot the solo. The village square was alive with gentle noise, voices mingling, spoons clinking, feet tapping as children played. Music floated from an open window above the bakery. Amid all that togetherness, a boy stood alone near the fountain. He wasn't crying. He wasn't lost. He simply stood still while the world moved. A woman weaving flower crowns nearby noticed. She didn't rush over. She didn't draw attention. Instead, she began making a second crown alongside the one in her lap, petal by petal. quiet and slow. When she finished, she rose, walked past him as though simply strolling, and gently handed him the second crown. "You look like someone who would wear this well," she whispered with a wink, before continuing on. He smiled. He put it on. He rejoined the edge of the play. Here they spot the solo, not to pity, not to rescue, but to include. They know that people don't always ask for connection with words. Sometimes they ask by standing near, by lingering a little longer, by looking without speaking. And the ones who notice, they change the shape of the room. Because no one should have to shout to be seen. Make an offer. Inside the clay-stained walls of the artist co-op, a young woman stared at her workbench, filled with unfinished pieces. Bowls not quite round, vases that leaned, her hands hung by her sides. A friend entered with a warm basket of bread and cheese, took one look, and without asking, set it on the counter. "No pressure," he said, "but if you want, I could sit with you while you work." She didn't speak right away. Then slowly, she nodded. Here, they make an offer. They don't force help. They don't disappear in the name of giving space. They show up gently, with options, not orders. They say, "I can walk with you through this. I can hold the other end. I can listen while you think." Because offering is not about assuming need. It's about making connection possible. It lets the other person choose. And sometimes just knowing someone would help, even if you don't accept it, is enough to feel less alone. The woman picked up her carving tool again, and her friend sat down, quietly breaking bread. Merged smoothly. The cobbled path that curved along the edge of the stream was narrow, just wide enough for one cart and a few careful feet. At the morning hour, many villagers walked this way, children with baskets, elders with canes, farmers rolling small wagons of produce. At one bend, a man walking briskly slowed when he noticed another cart approaching from the opposite side. He didn't try to push ahead. He didn't make it a test of who would yield first. He simply stepped to the wider side of the path and smiled. "After you," he said, with no trace of impatience. The cart passed. The man continued. Nothing tangled. Here they know how to merge smoothly. In conversation, in doorways, in daily life. They listen before inserting their story. They wait for space before stepping in. They respect rhythm, not just right of way, because life flows better when no one insists on being first, when no one rushes into another's lane without looking. Merging smoothly is not about shrinking. It's about honoring motion. And when you move with awareness, everyone arrives more gently. Don't kill joy. The children had gathered in the orchard with scarves tied around their waists and leaves stuck in their hair, creating their own impromptu play. It was chaotic and magical, narratives jumping from pirates to dragons to invisible kingdoms, all within the space of 10 minutes. An older boy watched from the side, arms folded. He started to step forward. That doesn't even make sense. Dragons and pirates don't. But an elder resting beneath the apple tree placed a gentle hand on his arm. "Let it live," she whispered. "They're building joy. Don't be the hammer." He stopped, watched again. And this time he smiled. Here they teach. Don't kill joy. When someone's eyes light up, when their laughter floats freely, when their imagination leaps, let it be. Even if it's messy, even if it doesn't fit logic, even if it's not your version of fun. They know that joy, especially fragile joy, must be protected like fire in the wind. It needs shelter, not critique, permission, not pruning. Because joy doesn't survive in correction, it blooms in safety. And later that same boy tied a scarf around his head and joined the pirates. Lead with questions. Under the pergola at the edge of the market square, a mentor sat with a small group of apprentices. The sun filtered through the wooden slats above, laying golden stripes across their faces and notepads. One apprentice hesitated before speaking. "I don't get how to finish the grain measurement," she said. The mentor didn't answer right away. Instead, she asked, "What part feels unclear?" The apprentice blinked. "The conversion part, maybe. I think I'm overthinking it." Another nodded. "Me too." The mentor smiled. "What would happen if we rewrote the question?" Here they lead with questions, not to quiz, not to show off what they know, but to guide others to their own wisdom. Because questions create space. They open doors that answers can sometimes close. They invite curiosity, collaboration, and creativity. When you lead with a question, you say, "I trust your ability to think. I respect your process. Let's walk this together." And so they rewrote the problem on a fresh page. By the end of the hour, the apprentices weren't just solving. It felt like discovery. And discovery is the most lasting kind of learning. Hold the elevator. It was a small moment. The kind most people would miss. The kind that never makes it into stories. But in this village, small moments are everything. Inside the library's east wing, a bell rang as the lift door began to close. A young woman inside, arms full of books, instinctively reached out and pressed the button to keep it open. A librarian down the hall jogged slightly, breathless but smiling. "Thank you," she said as she stepped in. "Of course," the other replied, shifting her books. No big gesture, no fuss. Just holding the elevator. In this village, it's not just literal. It means leaving space for someone who's almost there. It means waiting that extra breath. It means slowing down enough to say, "You matter too." Holding the elevator could be holding a seat, saving a spot, keeping a conversation open a little longer. It's generosity in seconds, and it changes everything. Because when you feel the world making room for you, you begin to trust it more. And that trust, that's how people bloom. Save heavy stuff. The tea house at dusk was a soft kind of quiet. Low whispers, steam curling from ceramic cups, and music playing so lightly it almost felt imagined. At a corner table, two friends sat. One was leaning forward, hands ringing gently, eyes flickering with words not yet spoken. The other noticed, paused, and said softly, "I'm here for anything you need. Would it help to talk now, or would you rather sit with the light things first?" The first friend hesitated, then let out a slow breath. "Maybe the light things, for now." And so they talked about herbs, about cloud shapes, about a funny cat that had startled someone near the market. Because here they know when to save heavy stuff. Not because it's unimportant, but because timing is kindness. Because not every heart is ready to hold weight at every moment. They respect the energy it takes to speak hard truths, and they know when to wait, when to create softness around someone first. And when the time came, later, when the stars were high and the kettle was refilled, the friend leaned in and said, "Okay, I'm ready now." And the heavy things were shared, not rushed, not shut down, just received. Let them be mad. A child stormed out of the town art studio, paint smudged on her sleeves, tears streaking her face. Behind her, two adults stood still, watching. She sat down near the water trough, arms crossed, jaw clenched. One of the adults approached, slowly without words, and sat nearby, not too close. They didn't say, "Calm down." They didn't say, "Don't be upset." They simply sat and waited. Here they let people be mad, because anger is not wrong. It is not dangerous if it's allowed to pass through. It's a weather system, not a verdict. They know that when someone is angry, they are often hurt beneath the fire. So they do not extinguish it with control. They contain it with care. Later, the child whispered, "It wasn't fair." The adult nodded. "I believe you." And the child cried, not in rage, but in relief. Because being allowed to feel opens the door to healing. And in this village, they teach from the start. Emotions are not enemies. They are messengers. Let them speak. Let them move. Let them go. Don't ask to avoid. The tailor's shop was full of conversation that morning. Fabric folding, scissors snipping, the rhythm of routine. A seamstress stepped aside to speak with her friend. "I want to ask him," she whispered, "how he's doing after the news, but I'm afraid I won't know what to say if he breaks." Her friend looked at her, kind eyes steady. "Then don't ask just to avoid your own discomfort." The seamstress paused, took a breath, and nodded. She stepped back into the workroom and gently approached the man at the far table. Her voice was quiet but clear. "Do you want to talk about it?" He looked up, eyes already moist. "Yes," he said, "I do." Here they don't ask to avoid. They don't throw out questions like shields. They ask to engage, to hold space, to make room for real answers. Because to ask someone how they are means being ready for the truth. Not every question is safe, but every genuine question is sacred. And sometimes the hardest thing isn't asking. It's staying present when the answer comes. Let silence breathe. The courtyard fountain trickled gently in the early evening, casting soft echoes between stone walls wrapped in ivy. Two friends sat on a wooden bench beneath a fig tree, hands around warm mugs. One had just shared something heavy. Not dramatic, but deep, like a truth that had waited a long time to be spoken. And when she finished, she didn't look up. She just stared into the dark tea, letting her breath settle. Her friend didn't rush to speak, didn't fill the quiet with comfort or advice. He simply sat. Let the silence stretch, wide and safe. Here they let his silence breathe. They don't treat quiet as empty. They know it's full, full of digestion, full of space, full of respect. They've learned that silence is not the absence of support. It is often the purest form of it. A space where the heart can catch up, where truth can settle into the body like soft rain into soil. And when the woman finally did speak again, her words came not from urgency, but from clarity. Because silence had given her the room to find them. Exit gently. At the edge of the community gathering, as twilight deepened into starlight, people began to slowly rise from their cushions, fold their blankets, and say their goodbyes. A man stood, brushing crumbs from his lap, when a woman beside him touched his sleeve. "You're leaving?" He nodded, offering a warm smile. "But I wanted to hear about your garden," she said. He didn't shrug or wave it off. Instead, he stepped back to her side, lowered his voice, and said, "I'd love to tell you, just not tonight. I'm heading home to rest. But let's pick it up tomorrow morning." She nodded, her smile soft with understanding. And he placed his hand on his heart, bowed slightly, and said, "Thank you for today." Then he left, gently. In this village, they don't disappear. They don't rush out with mumbled excuses or sudden vanishing. They exit gently. And because the way you leave matters, it's a final thread in the fabric of connection. A soft hand on the shoulder, a nod, a closing of the circle. Leaving gently says, "You were important to me. This mattered. And even though I'm going, I leave peace behind me." Smile at someone. Just before sunrise, the baker stepped out of her home with flour already dusting her apron. The streets were still mostly asleep, the sky painted in soft lavender hues. She passed a man on the corner bench, an elder who had lost his partner that spring. He was always there early, always quiet. As she passed, she met his eyes for a brief moment and smiled, not out of pity, not out of performance, but out of presence. He smiled back, didn't speak, but his shoulders lifted a little. His breath deepened. His day began with something good. Here they remember to smile at someone, not because it fixes everything, but because it softens things. It's a gift that costs nothing and means everything. They know that to meet someone's eyes and offer warmth, without asking for anything in return, is one of the simplest, most beautiful human acts. A smile is a small door. And when someone walks through it, the day opens. Impact over intent. The sun was rising over the village rooftops, light spilling across the cobblestones in long golden streaks. In the garden near the library, two friends stood facing one another, one speaking, the other listening. "I know you didn't mean to hurt me," said the listener gently, hands clasped in front of them. "But you did." The speaker winced, brows furrowed, ready to explain. But then he stopped. He took a breath. "I'm sorry," he whispered. "I didn't realize. Thank you for telling me." And with that, the space between them softened. Here, they honor impact over intent. They know that good intentions don't always shield others from pain. They understand that harm can happen even when the heart was kind. Oh, and so they listen. Not to defend, not to justify, but to receive. Because when someone tells you you've hurt them, the most healing words aren't, "I didn't mean to." They are, "I believe you." And in that belief, the wound begins to close. Not with denial, but with accountability wrapped in care. Room for late bloomer. In the far corner of the greenhouse, a small pot sat tucked between towering tomato vines and blooming calendula. Inside it grew a seedling, one that had sprouted much later than the rest. The other plants stretched tall, already flowering, their leaves glossy and proud. But the gardener knelt beside this pot every morning. She watered it gently, spoke to it, encouraged it, not with urgency, but with love. "I see you," she'd whisper. "Take your time." Weeks passed, and then one soft green shoot broke the soil. Not in a rush, but in readiness. Here, they make room for late bloomers. They don't shame slowness. They don't measure worth by speed. They know that some take longer to speak, to grow, to find their voice, their joy, their place. And when they do, the bloom is just as sweet, sometimes even sweeter. In classrooms, workshops, and circles of friends, they hold space for those still unfolding. They say, "Whenever you're ready, we're here." And when that small plant finally flowered, the gardener simply smiled, as if to say, "I always knew you would." Ask, then empathize. The ceramic shop was quiet that afternoon, the light through the windows soft and dusty. A young man stared at a broken bowl in his hands, one he had dropped by accident during cleanup. A friend approached, kneeling beside him. She didn't jump to comfort. She didn't say, "It's okay," or "Don't feel bad." She asked first, "How are you feeling right now?" He looked at her, surprised, then answered softly, "Embarrassed, and a little stupid." She nodded slowly. "That makes sense," she said. "I'd feel that way too." Then, and only then, did she say, "You're not stupid, just human. We all drop things." Here, they ask before they empathize, because they know that guessing someone's feelings is not the same as hearing them. They don't bypass pain with quick comfort. They walk through it with presence. They ask, "Where are you right now?" And whatever the answer, they meet it there gently. Because empathy isn't a speech, it's a mirror. And the moment someone sees their feelings reflected back, they feel safe enough to begin healing. Credit sources. In the old schoolhouse by the lavender fields, children were gathered for their weekly project fair. Tables were lined with sketches, clay sculptures, and handwritten pages in careful script. One girl stood beside her display, a map of the stars, carefully illustrated, with soft watercolor constellations sweeping across parchment. As she explained her work, she pointed to a corner of her project board. "I learned most of this from my grandfather," she said. "He taught me the stories behind each constellation, and I added some things I read in Miss Eliza's book too." Her teacher smiled. So did her classmates. Here they credit sources, not just in schoolwork, but in life. When someone teaches them a recipe, they say, "This is from Nora's kitchen." When they repeat a quote, they add, "My uncle used to say this." When they build on an idea, they honor who gave it shape. Because crediting isn't about rules, it's about respect. It's about tracing love and wisdom back to where it began. And it teaches them to stay humble, to see their growth as part of a larger story, a shared story. And that makes their knowledge feel belonging. kindness over rightness. The hallway outside the weaving room was narrow, just wide enough for two to pass if one turned slightly. Two neighbors met there, one with dyed threads coiled in her arms, the other carrying a basket of lentils. They paused, exchanged polite smiles. Then a quiet murmur rose. "I thought the meeting was today," said one. "No, it's definitely tomorrow," the other replied. A third person nearby overheard and chimed in. "Actually, I think you're both remembering it differently." There was a pause. But instead of debating, the first woman laughed gently. "Well, I hope you're right." And the second replied, "If I'm wrong, I'll bring extra tea tomorrow." Everyone chuckled. Here they choose kindness over rightness. Not because truth doesn't matter, but because how truth is handled matters more. They don't weaponize correctness. They don't argue over details that can be clarified with ease. They ask, is being right more important than being kind? Can I leave space for someone's dignity, even as I clarify? Because often what people remember most is how you made them feel, not whether you were right. Reactions stick. In the middle of the pottery studio, a boy stood frozen over a newly fired vase. It had cracked. He stared at it, jaw tense, eyes beginning to sting. Across the room, his mentor saw the moment happen. She didn't raise her voice, didn't sigh in disappointment. She crossed the floor slowly, knelt beside him, and placed a gentle hand on his shoulder. "We can learn from this," she said, "and you're still an artist." His eyes flooded, but this time with relief. Because in this village, they know that reactions stick. They understand that the first response to someone's mistake can echo for years. That when a child shows you their mess up, they're also showing you their heart. And how you respond. Remember, that tone is remembered longer than content. A raised eyebrow, a soft chuckle, a word of encouragement. It sticks. It shapes confidence or shatters it. Here they choose words like balm. And when they must correct, they do so wrapped in warmth. Because the clay is still soft, and every reaction leaves a mark. Ease the weight. The community bakery buzzed with warm, yeasty air. Loaves lined the shelves, still steaming, and behind the counter, a woman carried a large sack of flour across her shoulder. She didn't complain, didn't ask, but her steps faltered slightly at the edge of the counter. A young man, passing through on his way to sweep the storefront, noticed. He stepped beside her wordlessly, lifted one edge of the sack, and together they lowered it gently to the table. She exhaled. "Thank you," she whispered. Not just from her lips, but her entire frame. Here they learned to ease the weight, even unspoken ones. They don't wait for people to collapse before helping. They don't require drama or signals. They look closely. They notice the tension in a jaw, the shift in someone's gait, the silence that lasts a bit too long. And when they offer support, they do it with humility, not to be praised, just to share the load. Because everyone carries something: grief, worry, doubt, exhaustion, and a hand offered gently, it can change the shape of an entire day, sometimes even a lifetime. Reply. All rarely. In the candlelit hall where messages were often read aloud, a scroll had been pinned to the central board, an invitation to contribute ideas for the upcoming Harvest Festival. As the villagers came by and read it, many offered comments, suggestions, and names in small handwriting below. But one woman, known for her long-winded opinions, began drafting a full response, detailing every possible change and idea addressed to the entire village. Before posting it, she paused, looked at the growing list again, then folded her scroll, walked over to the organizer, and handed it quietly into her hands. "I thought maybe this would be better shared just with you," she said. The organizer smiled, clearly relieved. "Thank you." Here they practice a gentle rule. Reply all rarely. Not just in messages, but in life. They consider the weight of their words, the space they occupy, and whether a comment is meant for everyone, or just someone. They value clarity over volume, respect over interruption. And they know that some thoughts blossom better in private than in a crowded room. Not every voice needs a stage. Some are more powerful, whispered directly, hand to hand, heart to heart. Don't punish fragility. By the town's reflecting pool, a woman sat on the bench with trembling hands. Her eyes were red-rimmed, her breath slow but uneven. A child passed by, paused, and approached her carefully with a dandelion puff. It's not much, he said softly, but I saved it. She managed a small laugh between tears and took it, cradling the fragile stem. Across the square, someone watched with a raised brow, whispering to another. But before the whisper could turn sharp, an elder gently touched their shoulder. Careful, she said. Some people are in their spring rains. You don't punish the earth for being soft. Here they teach. Don't punish fragility. Don't mock it. Don't avoid it. Don't treat it like failure. They know that to be fragile is to be human. It's often the sign of someone still choosing to feel, even when it hurts. So they make room for quivering voices, for breaking mid-sentence, for tears in unexpected places. They hold that space like a cocoon. Because what's fragile today may fly tomorrow. And it deserves the tenderness that lets it heal. Show vulnerability. The rain was gentle that morning, tapping on the roof of the music hall where the villagers gathered once a week to share songs and stories. A woman stepped forward, holding an old lyre. Her fingers trembled slightly as she strummed the first notes. I wrote this, she said softly, after my father passed. The room fell into a hush, not tense, not expectant, but open. She began to sing, her voice unsteady but honest, and as it wavered, no one flinched. No one corrected her. No one filled the silence. They stayed. Here, they are taught to show vulnerability. Not for attention, not for sympathy, but for truth. They know that strength isn't always loud, that sometimes courage looks like shaky hands and cracking voices. They do not mock what is raw. They hold it. They nod in respect. Because to be vulnerable is to invite others closer, not to your perfection, but to your realness. And after her song, they didn't applaud wildly. They simply placed hands over hearts in quiet honor. And she smiled through the mist in her eyes, not because it was perfect, but because it was shared. Don't laugh first. In the workshop behind the apothecary, a boy was excitedly demonstrating a new kind of salve container he had crafted, one with a tiny twist lid made from walnut shell halves. He showed it proudly to his older brother, waiting for approval. But before the boy could explain the purpose, the brother chuckled. Looks like a snail with a hat. The boy's shoulders sank. He tucked the little invention behind a jar and mumbled, Never mind. The room dimmed, not from light, but from spirit. Moments later, their grandmother entered. She looked at the boy's hands, still curled around the shell. What's this? She asked, crouching to his level. He hesitated, then uncurled his fingers. She looked closely. Ingenious, she whispered. She turned to the older boy. You can laugh, but never first. Let them speak. Here they learn. Don't laugh first. Let the idea breathe. Let the dream be described. Let the person arrive fully before you react. Because laughter, too early, can close a door forever. They understand the timing of joy and critique, and they choose wonder over wit, especially in the fragile beginning. Let them evolve. In the quiet of the stargazing fields, a young woman once known as the prankster of the village sat reading poetry aloud under the night sky. Her voice was calm, deliberate, almost reverent. A group nearby watched, puzzled. She's so different now, one whispered. She used to make jokes during weddings, said another. But an elder nearby leaned forward and said, and now she makes space for silence. They nodded, slowly understanding. Here they let people evolve. They don't trap others in who they used to be. They don't rehearse old versions of someone when a new chapter has begun. Because people are not stone statues. They are gardens, changing with seasons, budding in. And while memories matter, They are not the final word. When someone softens, they don't mock it as weakness. When someone grows serious, they don't pull them back into chaos. They watch with curiosity, with respect, and say, I see who you're becoming. I'll meet you there. Because honoring someone's evolution is one of the greatest forms of love. Answer the call. Just past the edge of the orchard, nestled between rows of lavender and olive trees, lived an old bell. It didn't ring often, but when it did, it wasn't for emergencies. It was for needs. A child who needed help gathering spilled apples. An elder who needed someone to carry a water jug up the hill. A lonely heart who just wanted company by the fire. On one such evening, a soft chime echoed through the dusk. No urgency, just calling. And as the sound faded into the fading gold of sunset, people began to stir. Someone folded up a chessboard. Someone else placed a lid on a pot of stew. And together they walked toward the bell. No one asked, why me? No one said, what now? They simply answered. Here they learn. Answer the call. Not because you are always able, not because you're always strong, but because someone reached out. And that reaching matters. They know that some calls aren't loud. Some don't come through phones or cries. Some are sighs, or subtle silences, or changes in someone's routine. But the principle is the same. When the bell rings, you show up, even if only for a moment, even if just to say, I hear you. Hold the space. In the weaving room above the East Hill, thick silence blanketed the loom floor. Not a tense silence, but a listening one. A man sat in the corner, speaking slowly about his partner who had passed a season ago. His voice didn't quiver, but you could hear the hollow spaces between the words, like footprints in snow. The three people around him didn't interrupt, didn't reassure, didn't shift in discomfort. They simply held the space. One knelt beside the fire, stoking it softly. Another poured tea, hand steady. The third offered only their presence, like a hand resting on the back of the air. Because here they understand. You don't have to fix what hurts to honor it. Sometimes you just sit beside it. You keep the room safe and warm and wide enough for sorrow to stretch its limbs without fear. Holding space is not passive. It is active restraint. It's resisting the urge to rush in, to advise, to minimize. It's saying, I trust you to feel this. I'm here as you do. And when the man finally stopped speaking, the silence that followed was not empty. It was complete. Avoid vague offers. Outside the community carpentry shed, a girl stood frowning at the crooked legs of a stool she had tried to build. Her shoulders slumped as she looked around. Do you need help? Someone called from the porch. She paused, then shrugged. Maybe? But the voice didn't follow up. The question faded into the afternoon breeze. Later, an older woman walked by. She studied the wobbly stool, then looked at the girl and smiled. I have 10 minutes, she said. Want me to help you sand the legs flat? The girl brightened. Yes, please. Here they avoid vague offers. Not because they don't want to help, but because clarity honors capacity. They don't say, let me know if you need anything, then disappear. They say, I can walk with you to the market at noon. I'm free to listen after supper. Would it help if I took over the last part of that task? They know that vague help can leave people unsure. But specific offers open doors. They create safety. They communicate presence. And in that presence, burdens lighten, because they're not just offered kindness. They're offered certainty. Ask or advise. In the little apothecary at the south end of the village, two friends stood over a table filled with dried herbs, open journals, and bits of half-finished remedies. One of them, a young woman, sighed deeply. I keep getting it wrong, she muttered. This mixture always comes out bitter. Her friend reached for a jar of clover, then paused, and asked gently, would you like me to help you figure it out? Or do you just need someone to listen right now? The woman blinked, then smiled faintly. Just listening would be really nice. He nodded, stepped closer, and sat in silence while she unpacked the worry. Here they learn a quiet but powerful rule. Ask or advise. Don't do both at once. Don't leap in with solutions if someone hasn't asked. Because advice, however well meant, can sometimes feel like an interruption, like a dismissal of someone's ability to carry their own story. So they ask first, would you like my thoughts or just my ears? They let people choose the kind of support they need. And when advice is welcomed, it lands gently, not as a correction, but as a gift. Silence isn't apathy. In the tapestry room above the village meeting hall, a group had gathered to discuss a community decision, how to distribute new planting plots. Voices rose in circles, some firm, some anxious, some eager. But one woman sat quietly near the window, hands resting in her lap, gaze drifting out toward the pine trees. Someone muttered, "She doesn't care." Another replied, "Maybe she's just unsure." But an elder nearby leaned in, gently correcting, "She always cares. She just listens longer." Here they understand. Silence isn't apathy. They know that quiet doesn't mean withdrawal. It can mean processing. It can mean respect. It can mean waiting for the right words. They give silence room to breathe. They trust that thoughtfulness looks different in everyone. And they never confuse calm for indifference. Later, when the discussion had slowed, the quiet woman spoke. Her words were few, but pointed, measured, and kind, and the entire room shifted in response. Because when silence speaks, after it has been honored, it often speaks the most clearly of all. Stay humble. At the edge of the harvest celebration, a boy ran breathless up the hillside to find his grandfather, an old beekeeper with a gentle laugh and a reputation for wise things. "Grandfather," the boy cried, "they say your honey won a prize again." The old man chuckled, then shrugged as he poured 2 cups of sweet tea. "I suppose," he said, eyes twinkling. "But it was the bees who did the real work." The boy looked puzzled. "But you helped them." The old man nodded slowly. "I listened. That's all. Nature knows what it's doing mostly. I just watch and sometimes lend a hand." Here they are taught to stay humble, not because they lack pride, but because they hold perspective. They know that no one creates beauty alone, that behind every great act are others, visible and unseen, who helped make it possible. They speak of achievements with lightness. They pass credit freely. They understand that being good at something doesn't mean you've stopped growing. So they walk with grace, with gratitude, and with the quiet awareness that ego builds walls, but humility builds bridges. Hidden kindness. Behind the bakery's warm brick wall, just before sunrise, a small routine unfolded that few ever saw. An elderly man would arrive with a cloth bundle in his arms, leftover bread from the day before, wrapped in care. He'd place it gently beside the chapel steps. No notes, no names, just nourishment, left quietly. Some said it was for the stray animals. Others believed it was for travelers passing through. But the baker knew, and the children who helped sweep the courtyard knew. And they never said a word. Here they cherish hidden kindness, the kind that isn't performed, the kind that expects no applause, the kind that lives quietly between sunbeams and shadows. They believe that real kindness often happens when no one is watching, when there's no reward, no recognition, just a soft instinct to ease someone's day just because. Hidden kindness is the oil in the village's gears, the reason the gate gets fixed before anyone notices it's broken, the reason fresh water appears by the orchard steps on warm days, the reason people trust in goodness, even when it's unseen. Because here they know, what's done in silence can echo the loudest. Assume a draft in the candlelit scriptorium, where villagers pen letters, stories, and poems. A young woman shared a page she had written for the town's seasonal journal. After reading it aloud, she glanced up nervously. A man across the table furrowed his brow. Some parts felt confusing, he admitted. The woman's face fell, just a little. But the editor at the head of the table smiled softly. Every first version is just a beginning, she said. Assume it's a draft. Everyone nodded. Because in this village they live by a gentle rule. Assume a draft. In writing, in plans, in people. They don't expect perfection the first time, or the second, or maybe even the third. They give room for iteration, for unfolding, for finding the right shape after trying the wrong one first. And they extend that same grace to each other. When someone stumbles through an explanation, they don't pounce. When someone's new idea is messy, they lean in. They know that growth is a process, that words often arrive before wisdom. And when you assume a draft, you create space for something better to emerge, all together. Offer real help. In the clearing behind the woodworking shed, a girl struggled to carry 3 long planks of cedar, arms wobbling, breath quick, the wood threatening to tip with every step. Someone nearby called out, "Let me know if you need help." But she didn't answer. Couldn't answer, really, not without dropping everything. Moments later, another child stepped forward silently. He didn't ask. He took one of the planks from her arms, then another, and walked beside her. When they reached her bench, she turned to him, a grateful breath catching in her throat. "Thanks," she said. He smiled and replied simply, "You look like you needed a third hand." Here they learned to offer real help, not symbolic help, not polite offers shouted from across the room. Real, thoughtful, present help. The kind that doesn't require someone to plead for it. The kind that sees need and responds immediately, not theoretically. Because when someone's arms are full, asking them to ask for help only adds another burden. So they act. They move with quiet readiness. They don't overthink or hesitate. They just lighten the load. And in doing so, they teach a truth deeper than any lesson. Help is most healing when it's already halfway done. Embrace imperfection. In the village kiln house, shelves were lined with cups, bowls, and vases, each shaped by hand, each slightly different. Some leaned a little left. Some bore fingerprints along their necks. One near the bottom had a visible crack sealed with molten gold. The visiting merchant once scoffed, "Why display broken work?" The potter only smiled, running his hand along the golden seam. It's not broken, it's complete. Here they embrace imperfection. They believe that beauty lies in the honest shape of things, in the human marks left behind. They don't sand out every flaw. They don't cover every blemish. Because to them, imperfection isn't failure. It's memory. It's character. It's the proof that something was made, not by machine, but by hands, by effort, by trial. Even people here speak of their own flaws with softness. I talk too much when I'm nervous. I forget birthdays, but always remember hugs. No shame. Just truth, held lightly. They know that what makes something memorable isn't that it's flawless. It's that it's real. So they honor the crooked lines, the uneven stitching, the awkward pauses. Because in every imperfection, there's a whisper of courage. I dared to try. Turn and be curious. Along the hillside vineyard, 2 friends sat watching the late harvest. One had just shared a story, how their small recipe book had caught the attention of a traveling chef. The other friend smiled, but behind her smile was a tightness, a subtle flicker in her gaze. Later, as they walked home, she confessed, "I'm happy for you, but also, I felt a sting. Like maybe I'll never have that kind of moment." The first friend nodded gently, not offended, not dismissive. "That makes sense," she said. "I feel that way sometimes too." Then added, "Want to unpack it together? See what the sting is pointing toward?" Here, they learn to turn and be curious. They don't shame themselves for feeling it. They don't pretend it doesn't exist. They see envy as a compass, pointing to something within them that wants more light, more voice, more room to bloom. So instead of stuffing it down or letting it fester, they get close. They ask, what does this feeling want to teach me? Where am I dimming myself? What's the longing underneath the ache? And in that way, envy becomes less of a poison and more of a teacher. Not easy, but deeply freeing. Just witness. In the healing hut near the water's edge, A mother sat quietly, her face hidden in her hands, her breath caught somewhere between sobbing and stillness. A friend sat beside her, not holding, not speaking, not fixing, just present. A third person peeked in and whispered, "Shouldn't we say something?" The friend shook her head gently. "She doesn't need words right now. She just needs witnessing." So they waited, not impatiently, not anxiously, just with openness. Here they honor the sacred act of just witnessing, of being with someone in their pain without trying to change it. Because they understand, healing often begins the moment someone sees you fully and stays. Not to solve, not to shift, but to witness, to be a mirror that reflects, "You are not alone. Your pain is real. I am not afraid of your sorrow." They do this for grief, for joy, for confusion, for transformation. And in that simple act of holding space without agenda, they offer a kind of medicine deeper than advice or distraction. A medicine made of presence alone. Quiet birthdays matter. At the edge of the village, in a small house wrapped in ivy and forget-me-nots, an old man sipped tea beside the window. It was his birthday, but no decorations hung, no visitors bustled about. And that's how he wanted it. He had once loved the noise, the music, the dances, but now peace felt more like celebration. Still, someone remembered. Late in the afternoon, a neighbor passed by and placed a bundle of fresh thyme and lavender at his doorstep. No note, no knock, just knowing. And another, hours later, slid a hand-painted card under the door. And just before dusk, his granddaughter sent a candle with a single wick and a soft scent of honeyed citrus. No fanfare. But every gesture said, "You matter." Here they understand that quiet birthdays matter. Not every celebration needs a crowd. Some people just want to be remembered gently, to be held in someone's thought, even if only briefly. They don't pressure others to perform happiness. They offer presence in whatever shape fits best. A whispered message, a warm drink left on the step, a kind gaze across the table. Because in the quietest birthdays, there's often the deepest sense of being seen. And that is the true gift. Conclusion. And now, dear listener, as the story gently folds itself like linen at dusk, breathe. Breathe in the presence of these 100 quiet truths. Let them settle like feathers in your chest. Let them swirl through your thoughts like smoke curling from a hearth. You have wandered gently through a village of humanity, where kindness lives in corners, where silence is held like a gift, where slowness is honored, where your very being is already enough. These are not rules to memorize. They are seeds. Some may sprout now, others years from today, but each was planted with love. And as you lay here, eyes soft, body warm, heart steady, let the echoes of this journey rock you into rest. The moon has risen, the village sleeps, and in the hush of this sacred stillness, so may you. Good night, listener. You are loved. You are safe. You belong.